Well, this particular painting, I was about 12, 13 years old, and when winter come on, why, I went out and started the trap line, because this is one way we could make a few dollars to help us ourselves along. We had to make money any way we could in that family, and I would trap muskrat, mink, weasel, and you know, you could probably get I'd say about 25, 30 cents for a muskrat hide, but there was a lot of muskrats, so I was always skinning muskrats, and I know that I wouldn't do it again for anything. I would just think about them poor animals, but back then we did it and we had to do it. So, and this particular painting here is, I was about 15 years old when I was taking cattle out. Take them out every day, about 35 or 40 head of cattle. I'd take them out into the, out in the open on the sage country and stuff, and I'd graze them until evening, and then I'd bring these cattle in. But I always carried a canteen and a .22 rifle, and quite often I would be able to kill a cottontail or something like that and bring it in. My mother always hated the jackrabbits. They sometimes weren't good. They might be wormy, but then we just, we would get what we could off of the land, and that's just the way we lived back then. You know, as I got a little older, about 16 or 17, we had 2 potato harvests out there, and one would be the early potatoes, and they were tough to pick, a lot of vines. But when it come to the fall potatoes, the vines had dried up, and we could get 2 cents a sack for this size sack, which was 65 pounds. And I could actually pick 300 sacks of those potatoes a day, so it was $6 a day, and that was really good wages back in them days. In fact is, in the lower valley, I was a champion potato picker for a while, and we moved up to Ellensburg, and we challenged the team of pickers next to us, and the guy in there beat me and took my title. He got 351 sacks, and I got 321 that day. I think it was at a year 35 or 36, a bunch of us went down to southern Oregon, down in the placer fields that had been worked over quite a bit. They'd been worked by the old timers when it was pretty well, there's a lot of gold. And then the Chinese came in after them, and then it was just depression fellows after that. And I tell you, we'd make a sluice box. We could carry that little thing and pick up crevices and stuff and clean it out with a pan full and put it in the hopper and dip water with a bucket like that and run it through the sluice box. And we'd move up and down the streams doing that. And we made $1.50 to $2 a day, which wasn't too bad for depression people. I'll tell you, it was hard work though. You know, I lived in Idaho for several years, but between the time I was probably 10 to 15 years old, and I spent so much time on Buttermilk Slough and on the Snake River, just fishing or trapping and doing things on there. One day I was sitting over there fishing. I was about 14 years old. I was on the Snake River, and I watched a raft came down that river, and it had 2 car seats on each end of it. It looked like a Cadillac of rafts to me. I couldn't stand it. I took my clothes off and I jumped in the river and swam till I got on the raft. And by that time the thing was in Oregon. It was in the big eddy over there, and it had no pole or any way to get out of there. Finally it got in the mainstream again and started down. And as it went down, I realized that there's no way I could stop that raft. And I was going through a narrow strip in the river, what I thought was a narrow strip, and I dove off and swam to what I thought was the Idaho side, and I was on an island. And I had to go through the brush and go over there, and then there was another stream. I had to dive in there and swim over to the mainland, then hike for about maybe 2.5, 3 miles. I was buck naked right up through the bushes, and I realized how the Indians lived with the mosquitoes and everything snagging you. And you know, it would have been terrible if my folks went over there and found my clothes laying on the thing. I thought about it afterwards, how dumb I really was. This McCormick Meadows painting that I did after I'd come back from Roundup, I always had little things. Sometimes I didn't make many sketches on Roundup, but I'd have ideas in my mind I wanted to paint. And I painted this one because we'd have a cow camp in there and be rounding up cattle, and we had a couple of the Indians would be hunting at the same time. It was the fall of the year. We'd set up a camp by a little stream, and this is one of the things I got out of my Roundup days. This painting has a lot of meaning for me. I can remember my dad taking his coffee and sometimes a magazine or a newspaper, and that is after he learned to read, because I knew he couldn't read for a long time. My mother read to him. And he'd go out there and sit under that tree in the summertime and relax and take his time. And I know at the time he was living in a lot better place, but I remember the old shacks that we had lived in, and I wanted to put his mustache on, which he had shaved off by this time. Well, this little painting, I tell you what, they used to bring the Indians down from Canada by the truckload of people, and the Indian people would come and pick hops. And I was in the hop yard picking. I was about 16 years old, and I saw this beautiful girl over there. She had the prettiest dark hair, dark eyes, and she kept smiling at me, and pretty quick she winked at me. I about fell over. I ran back to my buddies and said, "Did you see that girl?" Did you see? Anyway, I never forgot her. I never even talked to her. But years later, I thought, well, I'm going to paint her. So here a few years ago, I tried to paint her for memory. And I never forgot that kid. Probably my first love, you know. Of course, there's been lots of them since then.